The moment Violet opened her mouth in the boardroom, she felt every eye on her. Waitresses didn't challenge billionaires. Everyone knew their place. Poor people certainly didn't speak back to the powerful. But something inside her snapped, and she stepped forward. She asked one question, and the room went completely silent. Lorraine pressed her back against the boardroom wall, trying to make herself invisible as the executives argued around the long table. Her feet ached from the double shift, and the tray in her hands felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She'd been standing there for 20 minutes, waiting for someone to notice she existed, waiting for permission to refill their water glasses. But to them, she wasn't a person. She was part of the furniture, something to be used and ignored. The man at the head of the table slammed his fist down, making everyone jump. Everyone except Lorraine. She'd learned not to react. "I don't care what the numbers say," he shouted, his face red and sweating. "We're cutting the lower-tier salaries by 15%. That's final." Lorraine's stomach dropped. Lower-tier meant her. Meant the kitchen staff, the cleaning crew, the security guards who worked nights. Meant her daughter's medicine would have to wait another month. Meant choosing between electricity and groceries again. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. "Stay quiet," she told herself. "Stay invisible. You need this job." But then someone else spoke up, a woman in a sharp black suit with perfectly styled hair. "We could also reduce their benefits package. Do they really need dental coverage? Most of them probably can't afford to go anyway." Laughter rippled around the table. Actual laughter. Like the idea of people suffering was entertaining to them. Something inside Lorraine cracked. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the thought of her daughter's face when she'd asked why they couldn't have birthday cake this year. Maybe it was 20 years of being treated like she didn't matter finally reaching its breaking point. Her mouth opened before her brain could stop it. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Nobody heard her. They kept talking, kept laughing. "Excuse me," she said louder. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward her like she'd fired a gun. The woman in the black suit looked at her with naked disgust. "Did the help just interrupt us?" Lorraine's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands trembled so badly the water glasses on her tray rattled. But she couldn't stop now. "I have a question." The red-faced man at the head of the table leaned back in his chair, a cruel smile playing at his lips. "The question? The waitress has a question." He looked around at the others, inviting them to share his amusement. "This should be good. Go ahead, sweetheart. Enlighten us." The condescension in his voice made her skin crawl, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. "Have any of you ever tried to live on what you pay us?" The silence that followed was different now. Heavier. Dangerous. "I work 60 hours a week," Lorraine continued, her voice gaining strength even as her legs felt like they might give out. "I work weekends. I work holidays. I haven't had a sick day in 3 years because I can't afford to lose the pay. My daughter needs medication that costs $400 a month, and your insurance doesn't cover it because you classified it as non-essential." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "So my question is, have any of you ever had to choose between feeding your child and keeping the lights on? Have any of you ever had to apologize to your kid because you can't afford to fix the hole in their shoes?" The woman in black stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. "Security! Get her out of here. Now!" But before anyone could move, another voice cut through the tension. "Wait!" Everyone turned toward the far end of the table where a man had been sitting so quietly that Lorraine hadn't even noticed him. He stood slowly, and something about the way he moved made the entire room hold its breath. He was younger than the others, maybe early 40s, wearing a simple navy suit that probably cost more than Lorraine's car. His dark hair was slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it, and his eyes were an unusual shade of gray that seemed to see right through her. "Let her finish," he said calmly. The red-faced man sputtered. "Mr. Hartwell, with all due respect, this is highly inappropriate." "I said let her finish." "Mr. Hartwell." Lorraine's blood ran cold. She just interrupted a meeting that included Marcus Hartwell himself, the billionaire who owned this company and half the city. The man whose signature was on her paychecks. She just signed her own termination papers. But his eyes were still on her, waiting. Not angry. Just waiting. She swallowed hard. "I just wanted to know if you understood what these cuts mean to people like me. Real people. People who work just as hard as anyone in this room but can't afford to take their kids to the dentist. People who are one emergency away from losing everything." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I wanted to know if you thought about that before you decided we were disposable." The silence stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. Lorraine could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of everyone's stare. She'd gone too far. Way too far. Marcus Hartwell walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. Everyone watched him like they were watching a tiger approach wounded prey. Lorraine forced herself not to back away, not to drop her eyes. If she was going down, she'd go down with her head up. He stopped 3 feet from her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the shadows under his eyes that expensive suits couldn't hide. "What's your name?" "Lorraine," she whispered. "Lorraine Mitchell." "How long have you worked here, Lorraine?" 11 years. Something flickered across his face. Surprise maybe, or shame. 11 years. He repeated it like he was tasting the words. "And in 11 years, has anyone from management ever asked you that question? Asked if you could live on your wages?" She shook her head. He turned back to the table, and when he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "Meeting's over. Everyone out." The red-faced man stood up quickly. "Sir, we have 3 more items on the agenda." "Oh, now." They filed out like scolded children, shooting Lorraine looks that ranged from fury to pity. The woman in black paused at the door. She should be fired for this insubordination. "I'll decide what happens to my employees, Patricia. Close the door behind you." When they were alone, the silence felt even heavier. Lorraine stood there clutching her tray, trying not to shake apart. This was it. The moment where everything fell apart. Where she lost the job that barely kept her afloat but was better than nothing. Where her daughter's medication slipped further out of reach. Marcus Hartwell walked to the window, his back to her. "My father built this company from nothing," he said quietly. "He started as a janitor in a factory. Worked his way up over 30 years. He turned to face her. He died 2 years ago and left me everything. The buildings, the investments, the responsibility for 18,000 employees." He laughed, but it sounded bitter. "I thought I was doing a good job. The stock prices are up. Profits are strong. The board is happy." Lorraine didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "But I've been sitting in these meetings for 2 years, and nobody has ever asked the question you just asked." He moved closer, and she could see something raw in his expression. "Nobody dared to tell me the truth about what's happening on the ground floor. They just show me numbers and charts and tell me everything is optimal." "I'm sorry," Lorraine heard herself say. "I shouldn't have spoken. I was out of line." "No." His voice was firm. "You were the only person in that room telling the truth." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I want to know everything. Every detail of what it's like to work here. What you struggle with. What you need. What we're doing wrong." She stared at him, trying to understand if this was real or some kind of trap. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being lied to by people who tell me what they think I want to hear. Because maybe my father would be ashamed of what this company has become under my watch." He pulled out a chair and gestured to it. "Sit down, Lorraine. Please." Her legs were shaking so badly she almost collapsed into the chair. He sat across from her, not at the head of the table but right there within reach. Like they were equals. Like her words mattered. "Tell me about your daughter," he said gently. And somehow, impossibly, Lorraine started to talk. The words spilled out of her like water from a broken dam, and once she started, she couldn't stop. She told him about Sophie, about the rare condition that made her daughter's joints swell and ache, about the medication that cost more than Lorraine's weekly paycheck. She told him about the apartment with the leaking ceiling that the landlord refused to fix, about the bus rides that took 2 hours each way because her car had died and she couldn't afford repairs. She told him about choosing between buying Sophie new shoes or paying the electric bill, about watering down the milk to make it last longer, about lying to her daughter and saying she wasn't hungry so Sophie could have seconds. Marcus Hartwell listened to every word. He didn't interrupt, didn't check his phone, didn't look away. He just listened with an expression that grew more troubled with each sentence. When she finally ran out of words, her throat raw and her eyes burning with unshed tears, he sat back in his chair and ran both hands through his hair. "This is happening to our employees," he said, and it wasn't a question. "This is happening every day, and I had no idea." "It's not just me," Lorraine said quietly. "It's most of us. The people who clean these offices at night, the people who cook in the cafeteria, the security guards. We all have stories like mine." He stood abruptly and walked to the window again, staring out at the city below. From up here, everything looked clean and orderly. Easy to forget the people down there were real. Easy to make decisions that destroyed lives without ever seeing the consequences. "My father used to say that a company is only as strong as the people who keep it running," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. He meant everyone, not just the executives. He meant the people who empty the trash bins and serve the coffee. He turned back to her. "I forgot that." Lorraine twisted her hands in her lap. "What happens now?" "Now." He pulled out his phone and pressed a button. "Jennifer, clear my schedule for tomorrow." "All of it?" "Yes, including the investor meeting." He hung up and looked at Lorraine with fierce determination. "Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency board meeting. And I want you there with me." "Sir, I'm just a waitress. I can't." "You're not just anything," he interrupted. "You're the person who had the courage to tell me the truth. You're exactly the person I need." He pulled out his wallet and handed her several bills. "Take tomorrow off. Get some rest. Be here at 8 in the morning." She looked at the money in her hand. It was enough to cover Sophie's medication for the month. Her vision blurred with tears. "Why are you doing this?" He smiled sadly. "Because you asked the question nobody else dared to ask. And because my father didn't raise me to be the kind of man who gets rich while the people who work for him suffer." The next morning, Lorraine walked into that same boardroom wearing her best dress, the one she saved for job interviews and funerals. Her hands shook as she took the seat beside Marcus at the head of the table. The executives filed in, their faces showing confusion and suspicion when they saw her. The red-faced man spoke up immediately. "Marcus, what is this? Why is she here?" "Her name is Lorraine," Marcus said coldly. "And she's here because she understands this company better than any of you." He stood up, commanding the room with his presence. Yesterday, this woman risked her job to tell me the truth. A truth that all of you have been hiding from me. That's ridiculous, the woman in black started. Quiet. Marcus's voice cut like a blade. He pulled up a presentation on the screen. Numbers filled the display. These are the wages we pay our lower-tier employees compared to the cost of living in this city. The gap was impossible to ignore. Even basic expenses exceeded what they were paying. This is what we spend annually on executive bonuses. Another slide showed a staggering number. And this is what it would cost to raise all our lower-tier wages to a living wage, plus improve their benefits. The number was less than half of the bonus budget. You can't be serious, the red-faced man said. That will destroy our profit margins. It will reduce them by 3%, Marcus corrected. 3% that will make up through increased productivity and decreased turnover. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. Effective immediately, we're implementing a $15 minimum wage increase across all positions. We're expanding healthcare to cover all medications with no exceptions. We're hiring enough staff so nobody has to work 60-hour weeks just to survive. The room exploded into protests, but Marcus raised his hand. Anyone who has a problem with these changes is welcome to resign. Because I'm also implementing a new policy that any manager caught mistreating employees will be terminated immediately. He looked directly at the woman in black. That includes you, Patricia. I have 3 reports of you verbally abusing staff members. You're done here. Her face went white, then red. You can't do this. Try to stop me. He gestured to the door. Leave. She left, slamming the door behind her. The sound seemed to wake everyone else up to the reality that Marcus wasn't bluffing. Over the next few weeks, Lorraine watched him transform the company from the inside out. He fired executives who refused to adapt and promoted people from within. He created a program where he spent 1 day every month working alongside employees in different departments, learning their jobs firsthand. And Lorraine stayed on as his special consultant, helping him understand the real impact of every policy decision. She became the bridge between the executive floor and the ground floor, making sure voices that had been silenced were finally heard. 3 months later, Lorraine sat in her new apartment with Sophie, watching her daughter play with toys they could actually afford. The medication was now fully covered. The crushing stress had lifted enough that she could breathe again. Her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. Lorraine, I wanted to tell you before it goes public tomorrow, he said, excitement in his voice. Forbes is running a story about our changes. They're calling it a blueprint for ethical corporate reform. 3 other companies want to do the same thing. She smiled through happy tears. That's amazing. It's because of you, he said quietly. Because you had the courage to speak up. You didn't just change this company, Lorraine. You started something bigger. After they hung up, Sophie climbed into her lap. Mama, why are you crying? Because I'm happy, baby, Lorraine whispered, hugging her daughter close. I'm just really happy. She thought about that moment in the boardroom when she'd asked the question nobody dared to ask. The moment when her fear had been overwhelmed by the need to speak truth. She'd thought it would cost her everything. Instead, it had changed everything. Not just for her, but for thousands of people who'd been invisible for too long. People who worked hard and deserved better. And it had all started with one simple question. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak up when everyone else stays silent. Lorraine didn't set out to be a hero that day. She was just tired of watching people suffer. But her courage reminded us all that change starts with truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Marcus could have fired her. He could have ignored her. Instead, he chose to listen, and that choice proved that real leadership isn't about protecting profit at any cost. It's about recognizing that every person matters, that every voice deserves to be heard. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that inspire and uplift. This story reminds us that we all have power, even when we feel powerless, because sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the most important message.